My name is John Munoz. I'm a senior here at UF, majoring in economics and international studies with a focus in Europe. I'm the president of the Model United Nations organization here, so just kind of like the general organization. And then besides that, I also work at the call center here at UF, so I basically call parents and alumni for gifts to the university. It's just as boring and as horrible as it sounds, but it pays well, so that's nice. After I graduate? I actually just accepted an offer at KPMG to work in their Economic Evaluation Services department in Miami. So a lot of what they do would just be working with international companies who trade and kind of setting the prices, making sure they're not breaking tax laws. Fun facts. I am a certified scuba diver. Despite how white I am, I'm Cuban. That's my fun facts. So my committee is Castro's 26th of July movement. It's basically the revolutionary movement that occurred in the late 1950s with Castro trying to overthrow the Batista government in Cuba. And it started essentially with the attack on the Mogada barracks in Cuba, and then after that, Castro spent some time in Mexico with his brother and a lot of the revolutionaries training, and then in December of 1958, they came to Cuba and essentially started their own coup, and a lot of the beginning of the committee will kind of take place in the mountains of Cuba where this revolutionary movement first began. I chose this topic actually because primarily because I'm Cuban. My parents were both born in Cuba, and I'm from Miami, so it hits home to me a lot. But also, in regards to that, when I first thought about making a Model UN committee, I was taking a class on Cuban and Puerto Rican history, and it was interesting. I had never really seen the other side of history. Growing up in a Cuban household, you always hear extremely negative things about Fidel Castro, and the class kind of humanized him and showed the struggle that he went through and how this revolutionary movement was almost a grassroots movement. It had a lot of popularity in Cuba when it first began. So I think the pretty obvious answer is that Castro left a huge legacy of communism in Cuba. It's one of the few remaining communist countries in the world right now, and I think Castro's legacy is felt not only in Cuba today, also in South Florida, the United States, and Latin America as a whole. So I think that's kind of how leaving a legacy, the theme of Flicks this year, will fit into my committee. So I want a lot of the delegates to really understand the time period. I think that's the most important thing for researching for my committee, and in order to do well, you have to understand what Cuba was going through at the time, the different forces in Cuba, be it Batista's government, the United States working with Batista's government, or the other revolutionary movements at the time. Also just understanding the culture and the racial divides in Cuba, as well as the urban and kind of regional and country divides. I think it's really important because it's up to the delegates to kind of shape the history of Cuba in this committee, but understanding exactly the culture and the context in which this committee takes place, I think is going to be really, really important. I'm most excited for the crisis updates. I think we're going to have some really good ones. We're going to have I expect a lot of cigars, some machetes, a lot of straw hats. I'm very, very excited for the crisis updates, and we're going to try to get creative, me and the crisis staff. So my first crisis update, I think a little hint that would be good for the delegates, is that you're going to quickly learn that this committee is not just about Batista versus Castro. There's going to be a lot of other forces involved, and I think the delegates should be researching that before.